as well. You'll note that I'm standing in a slightly different position so that you can see me. And after this, we can go straight to Christoph and Patrick of Evolutionizer. For the introduction, and you'll note I'm speaking to the rest of the room right now as well. We're talking today to Christoph Kollatz and Patrick Funcke. Christoph is the strategic advisor of Evolutionizer, and Patrick, the founding or one of the founding partners of Evolutionizer. And between them, they have a significant amount of both M&A experience, but critically also digital and IT experience. And they're going to be talking to us about how to make integration management and separation management as easy as possible using a digital tool that they have called Solyp. So I'm going to hand over to Christoph and Patrick.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for hosting us today. We appreciate the opportunity to share some of our experience with separation and merger in general, but also with, as said before, with the digital aspects of it, due to the experience we've gathered with the platform that we provide for strategy execution and strategy development. So our company Evolutionizer is a little bit of an unusual company because it was founded by slightly senior executives from enterprise leadership and from consulting. And we combined our knowledge with another subset of people who are experts in enterprise software development. And that has created the company of Evolutionizer. And we'd like to talk today about, in particular, the challenges of integration management office, separation management offices, and how we believe that the solution that we provide, which is called Solyp, and is an enterprise strategy suite, can be helpful in this application area. Now, when we talk about Solyp is a platform for strategy development and strategy execution, an end-to-end platform. So it typically covers your day-to-day strategy development and execution. And integration management and separation management is a separate and distinct use case from your normal strategy. It's not your regular strategy development and execution. So within the platform that we provide, two areas of our product are probably the most relevant, which are what we call the strategy boardroom and the strategic program management. So we have 4 different entry products on our platform, but we believe when we're talking about integration management and separation management, this in particular is something that relates mostly to the area of program management, because you're basically executing a strategy, a high-level strategy of either separating or combining companies. And Solyp, I'll just give you some technical cornerstones so you can understand what we're talking about and how a digital technology can help you here. Solyp has a few key features that are differentiating factors from many other solutions or many other tools that you might be tempted to use to manage separations or integrations. First of all, it's a highly configurable platform. So oftentimes people try to solve the complexity of managing large-scale transformations with either two specialized tools or two generic tools. So you may be tempted to do everything in Excel, PowerPoint, Microsoft Project, which would be the world of very generic tools. And I can promise you, you will be driven mad by trying to manage the complexity with those very generic tools. On the other hand, if you go into very specialized tools, such as project management, project portfolio management tools, again, they will be very optimized for a certain use case, which is not the same as separation management or integration management, which is why we believe that you need a platform that is custom built for strategy, but at the same time, highly customizable. So you can have a specific configuration for the special use case task of integration management and separation management. This also leads into the next technical cornerstone. You have to be able to adapt your tool while you're working with it. And this will be a little bit more clear when we come to the end of the presentation, where we talk about different phases in integration management and separation management, where you have completely different focus on different objectives that you're trying to achieve. So you have to be able to adapt while you're working with a platform or with a tool to your use case. The next thing that is a cornerstone is it's quick to deploy. It's born in the cloud. So as you probably are accustomed to today, pure SAS can be available today. You just say go and we set up a version of it. It's available immediately. It's also built natively on Microsoft technology, on Microsoft Azure, which means that it has the highest standards of availability, of security. We have all the certifications that are necessary to manage strategic content in the cloud, be it ISO, be it TSAX, all of them are available and fully certified, not only by us, but also by our provider, Microsoft. The provider Microsoft also means that we are highly integrated into your daily tools of business, which are in particular the Microsoft Office world. You don't want to have something that is not able to talk to your Excel files, your PowerPoint files. You need to be able, despite all digitization, you still will have to create documents documenting certain states of your transformation, create reports, etc. So you are able to still provide the look and feel of, well, these are now C-level ready documents that can be stored and can be analyzed and archived. And as I said before, through Microsoft technology, this also allows us to have the highest levels of security, the aforementioned standards, ISO, GDPR, and even TSAX. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Christoph, who will share his experience with the particulars of what really happens in integration management and separation management. Christoph, up to you.
Thank you, Patrick. Hello from my side as well. When I entered the business world in late 1980s, the strategic focus was pretty much on benchmarking, on competitive cost structures, and corporate restructuring, all driven by privatization and globalization of markets. M&A deals were certainly happening as well. Occasionally, many of them game-changing lighthouse projects. Today, all sorts of deals have become daily business, not only for the sector of the finance industry that focuses on transactions, for large multinational companies as well, and even for medium-sized companies. M&A is no longer a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and challenge. However, most deals are still critical and determining success or failure of a chosen strategy. Most of the time, two opposed projects are part of the same move, carve-out and integration. It reminds me always of yin and yang, opposed direction to accomplish one overarching mission. Activities and methodology of both have a lot in common, and even one level higher, steering of both processes looks extremely similar. That's why it makes a lot of sense to search and collect best practices, and in a second step, to digitize and automate whenever possible. This is what our core theme of today is all about. And I promise you that the digitization of some vital processes has already reached a maturity level you wouldn't expect. Next slide, please. The Integration Management Office and Separation Management Office is in the eye of the storm, or more actively spoken, the spider in the web while managing those processes. It's more than just another PMO, because it's in the center of a strategic move. Crucial for the company, career defining for the CEO, and a question of survival for the individual leading the process. From my experience, it has always been super critical to find the right candidate leading the IMO/SMO. I found the highest project success rate assigning the most senior manager with a transformational track record. independent from what his current position, his current job was. And since we have significant experience and expertise in the audience over there as well as in the virtual audience, let me only briefly go over main tasks of an IMO and SMO. Firstly, structuring, planning regarding time, people and budget, and coordination of the entire process. Lots of common sense is needed. Let me highlight the importance of the right cadence here. I strongly recommend in those projects a weekly cadence, at least at the beginning. The positives are pretty obvious. It's focus, high frequency prevents the project from sliding down on the individual priority list. Everyone's knowledge stays current. There's high momentum and timely decisions will be made. The downsides, an incredible initial workload. You can imagine significant weekly work routine. So automation is needed, but benefits clearly outweigh the downsides. And never forget, goal number one is delivering by legal operational day one. The second area is central reporting, controlling, escalating, risk mitigating, and so forth. While integrations tend to have a stronger focus on synergies than separations and carve-outs, I would like to highlight the importance of using the same language and methodology across the entire project. This is not a given and sometimes not easy at all to achieve, assuming two very different heritages coming together. Some of you may have worked already with the degree of implementation methodology. It's proven, it helps to track the progress on an action by action level as well on the project or program level. And it even allows kind of forecast for final implementation and realization of financial benefits. And last but not least, it can be automated. The third area is facilitating and challenging the work of external specialized advisors. Legal, audit, banks, pensions, environmental, HR, and the list is long. One essential and at the same time often overlooked aspect is that external advisors don't take over responsibility. In most cases, they can't indeed. That's why it is so important to challenge their work and don't be too lax. Next, please. The base of all IMO SMO work is like state-of-the-art project management work. Key basic elements, no rocket science at all. You see 5 of them on this slide. Program organization and work. One key target is clear definition of roles and responsibilities. Don't give any room for excuses. Second, global standards and guidelines. This is in particular important for distributed, global and complex organizations. One thing the well-experienced of you will always find split heads are in the area of endless disputes. Third, tracking and implementation progress. Precise methodology on one hand, and front-loaded effort to break down major work streams to an appropriate level of detail. KPIs and effect measurements. It's logically the next question. Does the output match expectations? Is our work effective, quantitatively as well as qualitatively? Reporting and status update, clear definition of reporting events, ensuring that the entire project is current and focus in those events on the need to escalate. Next. The benefit of doing this sometimes cumbersome work can't be overrated. All key stakeholders benefit from end-to-end transparency, the executive management as well as the program managers, the complete program office. And when it can be digitized and automated, it will definitely become less cumbersome. To put it in a nutshell, the better this groundwork will be delivered in a project, the more successful the project tend to become. Next. Successful integration and separation is certainly not all about a solid foundation. There are other elements equally important, which often must be sacrificed under time pressure. Why? Because the foundation we talked earlier about is so vital, and at the same time, those projects are always bumpy. Most of the time, therefore, needed to be allocated to the basics, typically 80% or so, the classical elements, and when it gets bumpy again, what do? You allocate even more time, up to 100% on a specific issue to solve. Because mission remains, most important mission remains, keeping legal or operational day one. In most cases, you will find IMOs and SMOs allocating very little time on activities like driving cultural change, sparring with top management, retain and attract personnel for key roles, or what is extremely important, develop and set up a roadmap and strategic next steps for the quarters after day one. Next. My personal dream in the past was, wouldn't it be fantastic to get a reliable and consistent digital support for all those classical elements, and having therefore much more time available to focus on and drive other equally important elements of an integration or separation. Patrick will now be sharing with you how this dream become reality.
Okay, thanks, Christoph. So let's talk about our experience when it comes to digitally supporting the Integration Management Office and the Separation Management Office. And the first thing that we think is worth reflecting out of our experience is that there are basically two phases of any integration or separation. And the first phase, you have to admit the phases may be overlapping, but the first phase is a phase that is driven by getting things done. There's day one requirements, there is day 100 requirements, but basically you have to do the mandatory things that you need to physically separate or integrate, make sure the legal structures are working, etc. So this is an area where you're typically throwing a lot of effort at it. As Christoph said, it can take up all of your attention of the Integration Management Office and Separation Management Office in the beginning. And this is completely driven by milestones, by mandatory things you need to get done, by understanding what the prerequisites and requirements are to make the next thing happen after the first thing. You have to manage risks and roadblocks, because no matter how good your plan is, you will always run into things you didn't anticipate or things you forgot. And then you have to adapt your plan and make sure that you get whatever your day one is or your day 100, get them done. So this is where digitization can help significantly, because it allows you to have a single point of truth and a system of records for everything you're doing, for what you should have done, what you should have gotten done, but also what you've already gotten done, and have a delta analysis, have transparency of where your gaps are, even have transparency of where your risks and roadblocks are. So this is basically where the tool is very collaborative, where everybody gets their area of responsibility, and then works into the system and says, this is where I am, this is the problems that I have, these are things we have to coordinate or talk about or even escalate. Oftentimes you need what is called a qualified escalation. So say you're working through some legal documents, some contract work or something like that, and you can already tell I will not be able to finish the work by the time that I need it. Then you do a qualified escalation where you say, these are the three things we can do. We can spend more money on it. We can try to move the delivery date, or we can decontent whatever we're doing. Please help us make the right decision at this point. So here, the digital tool is mostly about making sure that you don't miss out anything that could hinder your day one 100% that you need in mandatory things to do. And out of our experience, one thing that we need to understand is oftentimes people have the idea of saying, I want everything in one tool. And we agree to that approach when it comes to top-down. You need to have everything that's part of your integration management in it, but you don't have to have every detail. Actually, you can't have every detail for a very simple reason. In this phase, you often have to delegate tasks to separate legal entities, to consulting firms, to advisory firms, to legal firms, and they will not have the time, they will not have the inclination, they will not have the incentivation to do all the task management in your tool. And the time that you would have to invest to get everybody on board and working there, you will not have, and it's also not worth the effort. So it makes a lot more sense to say we have probably two layers of how we structure the work. The first is a top-down, overall overarching plan where everything is in there as a deliverable, but we delegate how the people get to that deliverable into the legal entities or into the organizational structures. And if they are comfortable working with Excel or have their own tools or own project management tools, that's fine. Let's just define what we need to know from you, and then just one person out of that entity will give you an update into your system on whether or not they will hit their deliverables or not. So that's a really important architectural approach when you're working with a lot of external entities, not to try to put everybody in one tool. You will not have the time to do so. It's much better to say, well, I have a leading tool, and then I'll allow everybody else to organize themselves the way they're more efficient and effective. And this is also an area where you're under so high time pressure that you're basically moving fast. And sometimes problems that arise, you will push them into the future if you can separate them and they don't hinder your day one approach. Now, the second phase, and as I said, it may be overlapping, is, to be honest, the second phase is something that many integration management offices and separation management offices never achieve. I've been part of 4 different post-merger integrations. 2 on the side of the bigger company, 2 on the side of the smaller company. And they all had reasonable strategic objectives of what they wanted to achieve with the integration that they were running. And in all 4 instances, we definitely hit all the marks on the day one approach. We had 100% of the mandatory stuff done. And then after that, everybody was taking a deep breath and saying, okay, now let's work on as we had before. Instead of then continuing and saying, well, what is our strategic objective that we're trying to achieve with our integration or separation? And now we have to run into a phase where we have an initial plan of how we think we can have scaling effects or descaling effects. But you have some objectives and you have some original plans of where you want to be when it comes to your performance afterwards. And this is where your work shifts from this hardcore needing to get things done, cost no object, into where you're looking at the more classical aspects of a program management approach and saying, well, what are the initiatives, what are the post-merger integration initiatives with which we can achieve those strategic objectives? So these can be cost-reducing matters, these can be increases in market share, whatever it is. All of a sudden, to make your separation or your integration a success, you have to continue the work. But all of a sudden, your focus goes onto KPIs instead of milestones. Now you're looking at financial effects, etc. And one thing you can be sure of, your original assumptions of how you will meet your objectives will have to be adopted. Again, out of my experience, out of four post-merger integrations, all the original assumptions of how we would achieve our objectives turned out to be wrong. but instead we found other ways. Instead of merging on the sales side and having a success on the sales side, for example, we had success on integrating the development departments and having a lot stronger development departments, just as an example. But it is something where you have to work on and then adaptively work in what we call a W structure. So you integrate the organization and say, well, these are the objectives that we're trying to achieve. And now we need to talk to each and every one of you about how best to achieve those objectives. So this is more akin to your regular strategy development and strategy execution work, where you have a high-level objective that you're trying to achieve. And then you integrate the organization and say, well, let's work together on achieving those objectives. With all the methodology that is available in strategy execution, such as KPI-driven with program gap, planning gap, execution gap, you can also integrate things like OKRs. One of the benefits here is, instead of just having the physical manifestation of having your day one done and legally being separated or integrated, you can use this process to actually build a new organization and a new culture. So through forcing the organization and the different parts of organization to identify with the objectives and work towards achieving them, you get a very natural path of, for example, in an integration, getting the different factions to actually work together to start fulfilling objectives. So this can be an incinerator and an accelerator of actually coming to a real integration, or in a separation to coming to a new culture that may be more agile, more dynamic, depending on how much of a split you had before, so how much you're building yourself up anew. But this is where the real work and the real fulfillment of objectives happens. And again, our experience shows that this is very often something that is not properly managed after getting the mandatory things done in the beginning. And a digital platform it can support you in many ways. Well, in phase one, it was all about transparency and managing risks and managing getting things done. All of a sudden, you're looking at a digital platform and a digital tool to help you to find the optimization potential, collaborate on defining how to achieve objectives under less time pressure, but probably with a lot more efficiency and effectiveness of actually getting towards the original objectives of why did you actually integrate or separate organizations. There are a lot more functionalities that you can have on a digital platform that can help you in very many of the different aspects of managing integration management and separation management office. But these are the 8 core elements and the 2 primary phases that we wanted to address that we find to be really helpful to think about when you're talking about how do I actually manage the integration or the separation, and what's the key points that I need to look at, and how best to support them digitally. And with that, I think we're in the time frame that we set ourselves, so we have some time open left for questions and answers if you have any. Robert, will you help us moderate this?
Yes. Okay. We do have our first question. Our first question is from Cheryl Bishop, virtual attendee from Roche. She asks, when in your experience is integration complete?
Excellent question. Christoph, you want to take that?
I can at least start, and you may chime in. So let me start with a story. I worked for Siemens around 20 years, and there in the history of Siemens, there was Siemens Reiniger, the medical part. Then there was Siemens Halske, that was more the low currency part, and there was a third one. And after literally 50 or 80 years, some of the colleagues were still referring to be, I'm from Siemens Halske or so. So to put it in a nutshell, you can mechanically really finalize and accomplish an integration. What is going on in the heads, in the culture, and so on, need time to grow. And if you, let's say, if you have a strong new joint mission and leadership which refers to that, then it will be, it may be a question of years, but it can take very, very long.
I'd like to add to that. I share the very same experience. I sometimes even refer to myself as a member of a company I haven't been part of for decades, because I've been there so long, and it's been part of my personal work experience and culture. I would say that it doesn't really, first of all, it's like an asymptotic curve. You're running towards a goal that you'll never fully achieve unless everybody who was part of the original companies is dead or no longer working. But that doesn't have to be a problem. It's only a problem if that identity still leads to discord and not working together. If it's just a proud heritage that people still have and bring onto the table, but it's not destructive, then you can basically ignore it or even have a little bit of a humor about it. I would say the integration is complete when you've achieved your original objectives and don't have anything still ongoing culturally that is destructive.
Okay. There is another question from a virtual attendee, a fascinating question. From Claire Marie Nasser, Head of M&A Integration for Dentsu International. I support a good automation tool, but its success is intrinsically linked to how mature your business is from a process standpoint in terms of project management. What are your thoughts on this? What can you say that your business is ready? When can you say your business is ready to use a digital tool?
Excellent question again, and very experienced, obviously. I have to leave a little bit the area of integration management and separation management, because that's a special use case where normal rules don't apply. You usually have a different organization, and you don't have a process for integration management or separation management ahead of time. You're basically doing it while you work. But in a general sense of digitizing processes, in particular in the area of strategy development and strategy execution, we find the point to be valid that it's made here. If you have no idea of, or if you have no process maturity, it's hard to digitize. That can be very tedious. What we do find is that bringing a digital tool along that is more than just a blank canvas, but has best practices, has ideas of how such processes could look, can help to give a real push to more maturity in your processes. But you always have to be aware of where your process level at the moment is and not overstretch your target. By that, I mean, if you have no experience in strategy development and strategy execution, to be in our realm, it doesn't make sense to start with, well, here's the full package of everything that makes sense with high maturity, and now go ahead and try to work that way. That will not work. You have to take steps and say, well, let's start at a point that is achievable with some push from the tool, some experience built into the tool to get to the next level. You have to have it as sort of a ladder where you're going up from maturity level to maturity level. But digitization can be very helpful to actually achieving the next level, pushing you along, dragging you along, and bringing along best practice templates.
Let me add something, Patrick, and more focused on the SMO and IMO situation. What do many companies normally do in that case? They hire an external consultant, either from the strategy side, so the McKinsey's, Boston's of this world, or one of the big fours. And what those guys bring to the table is experience in those processes and some level of automation. So there are tools which are focused on that. They they are focused on a certain, let's say, work stream, and so on and so forth. But what Patrick is referring to is then also looking ahead into the future. So not just applying something for the task itself, but preparing the ground for a smarter way to develop strategy in the future.
Great, and I hope that answers your questions, Claire and Cheryl. Leave a comment if you wanted to follow up. Our next question is from person in the hotel.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, it's Eike Huben from BASF. Building on this question, typically you have a really big challenge in motivating your team members to, well, report at all. So they are usually not even willing to fill out a PowerPoint slide. So I'm wondering how you motivate them to get into a system and put all the information in there, because without this information, the system is pretty useless.
Yes.
We see this challenge quite often.
Excellent point. And it is one that is not completely solvable by digitization. We have to be honest here. Digitization can help in certain ways. In particular, you can make it easy. That's one thing you can do. Having a very comfortable interface that reminds you that you do. So lowering the cost of actually giving feedback on your activities. That's one thing you can do. You can also create transparency on who is participating and who is contributing. So this can be helpful as well. Think of it as an opportunity to implement something like, well, these here are our most active users that have the most contribution towards whatever the shared objective is. That's something you can do on there, up to and including something like gamification elements. But there is a problem if people either are hesitant because they don't want to be transparent, or because you have a cultural problem. Then digitalization itself will not solve it. Then it's more a question of, again, can you use digitization to start fresh and to ease the burden of what's going on there and lower the entry cost, and even use things like privacy areas where not everything is all automatically transparent to everybody, but just to certain levels and layers, to whatever the reason for the hindrance is, to mitigate that hindrance. So again, digitization can help, but it's not the final solution if you have a major problem when it comes to the way that your organization is working and is willing to contribute.
We have time for maybe one more question, either virtual or in person. If you have an in-person question, please come over here. And let me see if there's any more virtual questions coming in or comments. During the lunch, there'll be some networking as well, so you can also ask questions then, and we will share the comments and questions with the speakers after the event.
And
as
I'm
well
sure
as
nobody would mind if we get to lunch a few minutes early. So maybe that's the hesitancy for questions.
And I hate to say it, but we actually have one more presentation before lunch.
Oh,
I heard in the Netherlands people eat lunch earlier, so I'm going against the cultural norm here. So my apologies. Well, let me then be the first to thank you for a great session, and I'm going to encourage the audience here to applaud so you can hear them live.
Thank you to all the local and virtual audience.
Yep, and you got virtual digital applause as well.
Yes, we can see that.
So
Yes,
I offer my thanks, and we will now adjourn for 5 minutes to set up the live stream again for one more session before the lunch.
And
Thank
Robert,
you again.
Robert, to anybody who has a question afterwards, we of course are available. Please just contact us.
And let me also mention that one of your colleagues is here actually at the in-person meeting, Gaston Rossi, VP Partnerships and Marketing. He's right there in the front, so anyone in person can meet him and talk about Evolutionizer in more detail.
Absolutely.
So thank you again. We'll see you all in 5 minutes.
Okay.